Space known as Area 51. Turns out Area 51 has a sister facility, Area 52, and it's a place of secret zone. Yeah, keep your campus here with a lowdown on Area 52.
Yeah, well, it's not quite as secretive as Area 51. For one thing, you can at least find it on some map.
Absolutely would be probably what they're going to do. They're going to put a hologram and say, oh, we're being attacked, by aliens. We've made a deal with the ambassador, and he says that they feel that Earth is a threat. But if you all take any weapons you have and turn them in, that they'll give us a second chance. I would take them and freeze them in a position 20 miles out at 7,000 feet, at 560 miles an hour, put them in the seat, say, and then give them 2 minutes of looking at the horizons, show them where the World Trade Center is, and say, I'm about to release you. When I do, you'll have 1 minute and 50 seconds to hit dead center. It's impossible. At the height of my career, as proficient I was in every kind of airplane, there's no way I could have done that. I mean, it's just too complex. For the same thing with 2012. It's just going to be a year like every other year. We're going to continue to have these wars. We will probably have a nuclear war, but things are just, going to go along fine.
And I even have a hunch that you might have been part of MJ-12 at one point.
It was December 6th of 1988. Bob sits down, and he says, I saw a disc today. And I'm writing out checks there, and I'm not paying attention. I said, what? He says, I saw a disc today. And a disc? Theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. I said, you went to Groom Lake? And he said, yeah. And I said, what are you doing here? I said, obviously they're going to follow you. Why don't you just, work there for a while and then come and tell us what happened? He says, because I have seen you take so much crap over the past 6 months about this. I'm telling you, it's real. I saw it. I touched it, I'm looking at him and said, what? He said, John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien. I said, you saw one? He said, yeah. I said, it couldn't have been a doll. It couldn't have been, no, it was one. And, these days you ask him that question, he says, well, I don't know. Could have been a doll. They were doing all these weird stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But that night, that's exactly what he said. The way security like that works is when they give you a clearance, and when you're deep inside like that, they tell you, look, John, we've given you this clearance, and of course we expect it to keep you secret, but we know that, every once in a while you may accidentally mention something at a party, you may have had too much to drink, and you think it'd be interesting to talk about this, and we just want you to know that, we don't really care, we won't hurt you, but we will kill your wife, your children, your mom, your dad, your parakeet, your dog.
Hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy, and this is Project Camelot, and we are very happy to be returning to see John Lear and do a retake and a new interview he's going to tell all, basically. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
You're gonna absolutely charm us and dazzle us with new information.
I'm going to tell what I know up to this point, and
Okay.
I'm not saying it's absolute ironclad what's really going on, but it's what I think is going on.
Great.
But I'd first like to say I can't believe it's been 2 years since we did this. It seems like only about 6 months. But first of all, let's talk about what happened at ATS. What do you know about it?
Okay, I know you've been banned. That's the extent of it, and we don't actually know why. What we know about it is that, or what we think we know, is that it's a CIA front and managed by the CIA. So if you've been banned, it might be that you're getting too hot.
That's what I think. And when I first joined ATS maybe 3 years ago, I thought, you know what? This is just a collection point for what people think is going on, so that they know what the general public thinks is going on. And they have a bunch of debunkers there that are, paid to go in there, and somebody talks about something, they say, oh, no, no, here's what's really going on.
Right.
So they generally influence public thought. But then I started to throw some, interesting stuff in there, and they didn't say anything. So I thought, well, maybe it's okay. So starting about 4 months ago, I started throwing some really secret stuff in there, which I'll tell you later. And it has to do with Navy submarines. It has to do with what the space shuttles do. And then pretty soon, I'm gone. And the mechanics of exactly why I'm gone is Jeff Ritzman and David Biedney were two of the main Myers debunkers. Now, the Myers story was true. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He took pictures, he went on rides. I don't care whether you say that, there was pictures of dinosaurs or the lady came out of Sears magazine. That's all contamination. The fact is it was true. And so I really don't have time to support the Myers thing, other than in the thread I would come up every once in a while and say, hey, look, I'm busy with other things. If I had time, I'd tell you exactly how the Myers thing happened and why I believe it. But all I want to tell you is the Myers case is true and John Lear believes it's true, and that's the bottom line there. And I'm telling you, I would get hit so hard on ATS, just pages and pages of people knocking me, particularly Jeff Richardson and David Biedney. So one day, I got a list of everything all the insults they made of me, and there were 16 of them. And I put them, at the end, I said, it's funny that any other thread, people would be taken to task for insulting another person, but apparently on the Billy Meyer thread, it's okay to insult John Lear, and I put these 16 things. Well, that was on a Sunday evening. Monday morning, I wake up, go to log on, and here's Skeptic Overlord. What's his name, Bill?
Bill Irvin.
Pardon?
Bill Irvin.
Bill
Mark
Irvin.
Allen is the other one.
Says, we've post-banned you here until you can prove that what you said that Ritzman and Biedney posted were true. We've had our best moderators, and they can't find a single quote that was true. So all we need is your help. And I'm thinking, holy smokes, I just, got all that, copied all that yesterday. So I started to worry because it never even occurred to me to go back and check to see if it was still there.
Wow.
I just assumed if Bill Irvine said it wasn't there and his moderators said it wasn't there, then it wasn't there. And so what I thought was one of the moderators was in on it and it's gone. And the only hope I have of recovering it is going into the archives. So that was like about 8 in the morning. And the whole day long, here's Bill Irvine coming back every 2 hours. John, we can't find any of this. We need your help, with a few little minor digs in it. So I'm waiting for Ron Schmidt to get off work at 6 so he can show me how to go into the archives. So finally, just before I went over to Ron Schmidt's that Monday, about 5 o'clock, I said, I'm just going to take a look and be sure that it's not there. And I found every single quote still there. So I laboriously took the time to copy every one and paste it on this one piece of paper exactly where it was, send it to Bill Irvine, and he sends me back an email, says, Jeff admitted it, it's a done deal.
So in other words, the moderators were kind of like in collusion with this guy, Jeff.
No, it turns out that none of them were colluding. It turns out that everything was still there. But Irvine said all his guys couldn't find those quotes.
But that's what I'm saying. If they couldn't find the quotes, then they suddenly found them. Then in a certain sense, it sounds like they're working with Jeff.
That could be. Anyway, Bill said if we all agree to keep this between us. I said, no, I don't agree to keep that between us. I want everybody to know exactly what happened here. You say this is above top secret and we're trying to get all this information. Why should this little feud in which you've caused me an entire day of grief and really I told Bill, I said, I've been posting here for 2 years. I spend 8 to 16 hours answering questions on ATS. And you accuse me of falsifying information? I mean, that's insane. So I wouldn't agree not to shut up, and they didn't let me on. So
it sounds like they're playing games.
yeah,
There's some
so they
games
had a
going
lot
on.
of people ask about John Lear, and finally on Sunday, the following Sunday, they let me on just long enough I could get in my 2 cents worth, and then I was banned forever. It was obvious that ATS has been a clearinghouse. They wanted the information that the public got to see if they could influence that. They weren't interested in having good stuff come out
Right.
there that the public could see. And I'm telling you, I was telling some good stuff, and I was getting away with it.
Well,
And
let's
it
get
was
that
really,
good stuff on here today.
it was really surprising. They
And
were
we'll
letting
get
me
around
get
that.
away with this stuff, and because I know what's going on, and so then it rapidly came to a halt. So now we've talked to several people at ATS, and they said nobody gets to put any more good stuff on. It's got to be backed up 100%, or they're banned and their post is deleted. I think the crowning blow was when they rolled in Jim Oberg. And Jim Oberg has been NASA's front man for 30 years. He knows everything about everything. And when we got into the debate on the neutral point, which I'll discuss later, which absolutely proves that there's 64% gravity on the moon, I got Jim Oberg. And I'll read you the exact thing he came back with. He was stuck. There was nothing more for him to say. He was done for. And that's when things started to go downhill. And I'll read you the exact thing that Jim Oberg said.
So, John, what's going to be your approach at this point that you're banned? Because in a way, that was kind of a place where you could connect with the public. Are you going to join another?
I post on 4 little forums, and anybody that calls and asks, I give them these forums. And it's no big deal. There's like 300 on one and 80 on another. And my bag is not reaching a lot of people. It's reaching the very few that are interested in what's going on. And that's not a threat to the government, really, I don't think.
Okay, well, there are plenty of people that visit forums that don't log on. So it's good news to know that
Yeah.
you're actually still out there and still posting.
Yeah, the stuff that we're going to talk about today is the stuff that's current on these forums. One is Open Minds, and the other is American Conspiracy. The other is Fantastic Forum, and I think there's one other. And then I have a website with Ron Schmidt that's called thelivingmoon.com, and I try and keep all the stuff that we find out on there.
Okay.
Livingmoon.com is an excellent website. I want to state this for the record. There are not that many websites that we at Project Camelot would be willing to recommend, but that's a good one.
Okay, let me
It's
tell
a
you about
very,
the
very
origin
good
of the livingmoon.com was when I posted the original huge megabyte pictures of the moon on ATS. In other words, I sent them by DVD to, what's his name there?
Bill? Mark?
No, Mark.
Mark.
And he posted them. For the first week, people were saying, well, I don't see, John, I don't see what you see there, and everything. And then this guy called Zorgon started to see the stuff. And so I would lead him to it, and I didn't lead him anywhere. I didn't say, well, here it is, because you can't do that. You got to let them find it. And Zorgon started coming up with this stuff. And then he started finding more than I did. And I said, we got to meet. And I'm thinking, holy shit, this guy lives in New Jersey, and I'm going to have to get back there. It turns out he lives, a couple of miles down the street.
That's great.
So he comes up here, we start trading information, and he already had a website, having to do with medieval stuff. So we just made the Living Moon a part of that, and the information just started to come in. From all kinds of sources.
Yeah.
Sources, I have no idea how they got the stuff, but a lot of stuff on the Russian black ships, and it just keeps pouring in.
It's a good site.
It's
a
about
good site.
10% of the stuff is posted on there just because we don't have the time. We'd like to have a secretary, but both of us are broke, so we don't have, can't put it all on there. So we put the most interesting stuff on there. and Ron works down at the convention center. He's the guy that sets things up and takes things down. But he comes
Now-
home, and every once in a while we get together, like once a week, and talk about what we're going to focus on. But that's it. And
Let me share this email with you, John.
Okay.
This is from somebody called Gary Dix, D-I-X, who used to work very closely with Simon, Mark, and Bill in the early days of ATS. And after a major disagreement, he quit. He's based in New Zealand. And he sent me a long email.
And the date?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I'll just read one of the pertinent paragraphs. As they become more negative over a topic, they begin to drive the threads using sock puppets, fake member names, as they don't want to be seen to be guiding directions in the threads as mods and admin. This is the style of mods and admin in the future, using fake accounts to allow them to freely post their ideas. You got this on record from a guy on the inside. Okay, now of course they'll deny it, but if you've got somebody whose username is Skeptic Overlord, what does that tell us?
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is in plain sight. ATS is a skeptical site. ATS is a debunker site. And so what the debunkers do, it's this phrase which you keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
So you're an enemy of anyone who wants the truth really out.
Yeah.
So they bring you in really close with the intention of controlling public opinion about you.
Right.
It nearly worked, but not quite. Because they made the mistake of calling John Lear a liar. And John Lear may be all kinds of things, but John Lear is not a liar. And everybody knows that, who knows anything about John Lear.
But what are the chances of, me posting those pictures on ATS, and the one guy who starts seeing the good stuff lives, 3 or 4 miles down the road? I mean, it was really great.
It's freaky.
But that's how synchronicity works. And every day I see an example of synchronicity.
Well, that means you're really plugged in to what's going on here, and that you're getting some unseen help, basically. A synchronicity is just being in sync with the universe.
Right.
In a major way.
Right.
And everything is going in that direction, basically the direction of disclosure and truth. So on that note, let's kind of dive in here. We know you've got a lot of stuff to cover today, so where would you like to go first?
First, we're going to cover the Nibiru scam, Project or Planet X.
Okay.
It is not there. It is not going to cause a problem in 2012. It's a scam. I see it working from every different direction. It's just a plot to keep us, in a state of anxiety. Everything's going to go along just as normal. The world isn't going to disintegrate. There's going to be no planet that comes and shakes everything up. Everything is going to go along just fine.
Are you saying this in general about 2012?
Yes.
Or are you saying this also
specifically about Planet X,
or
or Nibiru, or whatever you want to call it, and 2012. 2012 is like...
It's just a year.
Is what?
Is it just a year in your opinion?
Yeah. It's just like, what did we call this, Y2K? We all got generators and food and everything was going to collapse. The same thing with 2012. It's just going to be a year like every other year. We're going to continue to have these wars. We will probably have a nuclear war, but things are just, going to go along fine. There is going to be no absolute.
Okay. Where do you get your information? Are you just coming to this conclusion in your own head by putting 2 and 2 together, or do you have an inside source that's telling you
No
stuff?
inside scoop. I have never had an inside scoop on most all of my information. I've come out with it myself, and it's more fun like that because people say, who told you that gravity on the moon is was 64% and there's an atmosphere? Well, there's a lot of books out there, but basically I'm the guy that came out and said, yeah, there's gravity on the moon and there's the atmosphere on the moon.
Well,
as far as
why should we believe that you would know this? I mean, is it because you were a pilot, because you're trained in a certain way? Where is your trail coming from?
Well, as far as the gravity on the moon, we're going to talk about the Bully-Aldous-Newton law of inverse square. And we're going to talk about how usually NASA convinces you using Newton's gravitational law, which assumes the mass of the Earth and the Moon. That's not what you want to use. you want to use Newton-Borealis or Borealis-Newton law of inverse square because you don't have to care what the mass is. All you need to know is what the distance is and where the neutral point is. If we know where the neutral point is, the size of the planets, we can figure out what the gravity is. Now, we know what the neutral point is because number one, Wernher von Braun told us. Number two, the crew of Apollo 17 told us, and three, and one of the other Apollo missions told us. And it's about 38,000 or 39,000 miles. And if you work out the law of inverse square, it comes out to be the moon is 64% gravity of the Earth. That's all there is to it. You don't have to assume mass. And as far as planet X and Nibiru, that's based on 65 years of listening to bullshit, about, what's coming on and, what disaster is coming next. It's just, I know that there's nothing going to be happening. It's just
okay.
BS.
Let me ask you, just because we have several witnesses that are giving us evidence,
I
and
know
also
you do.
some secret
I know you
evidence
do,
in
and
this
that's
regard.
why
Now, we're certainly in question about this. We have not reached a conclusion ourselves. However, first of all, there's the South Pole Telescope. There's also the interest of the Vatican and the Jesuit footage that came out, with Barbado. Maybe you've seen the footage, maybe you haven't. Maybe you can give us some background on why you think that footage is not accurate or not real. And then there's also the heating of the planets. How do you account for the heating of the planets and the activity on the sun, which is going to reach a peak in 2012, as being meaningless?
Are you talking about global warming?
But it's not global. And David Wilcock and Richard Hoagland have gone through planet by planet and shown you how there's increased activity all the way down, and that there's actually heating up.
Yeah.
It's information in the public domain that every planet in the solar system is heating up. It seems to be connected with solar cycle 24. And then some people say that there's something else that's driving this.
I wouldn't even pay any attention to it. Everybody gets to believe what they want. In 2012, you can look back and say John Lear on April 2nd, 2008 said it was all bullshit. And if it wasn't, I was wrong. But, I think it's a total scam.
I'm sure you've rubbed shoulders with the Intel community. You know that your office is bugged. You've demonstrated that to us. There's a reason why they bug you. I mean, first of all, you're a pilot from way back. You're incredibly respected. You have a background, military slightly, and I even have a hunch that you might have been part of MJ-12 at one point. Okay, so you've known all the insiders. You knew. Tell me why it is. I mean, that you're saying you have no inside sources suddenly. I mean, Bob Lazar.
Let me correct it. I had 3 inside sources. One was Jimmy Doolittle, and he's the one that told my mom that MJ-12 existed. That story is important because when I was first getting into all this in 1987, and Chandray and Moore came out with the supposed Eisenhower briefing, and it talked about Majestic 12, I needed to know, is this true? And the only person that I knew that would have known beyond a shadow of a doubt was Jimmy Doolittle.
Okay, now who's Jimmy Doolittle?
General Jimmy Doolittle, behind you, that's him taking off to bomb Tokyo, taking off from the Hornet, incidentally the same aircraft carrier that picked up Apollo. And that letter that you see is when I had my accidental airplane crash in Geneva, Switzerland in 1961, and nearly killed myself. He was the only one to take the time to write me a letter and say, John, we all make mistakes. I've made plenty of them, but it's important that we profit. It's only important that we profit by our mistakes. And he took the time to write that whole letter. So I have it framed with him taking off on the Hornet to bomb Tokyo. General Jimmy Doolittle was an incredible general, very respected, and he was involved with MJ-12 up to his ears. He was not a part of MJ-12, but he was around our house in Santa Monica, 222 14th Street. He lived down on 3rd Street with his wife, Josephine, and they were in our house just like Vandenberg, just like Twining. All those MJ-12 guys were around our house. But, I didn't know that at that time, and my father never said much about UFOs other than that he believed them. And I never found out any of the other stuff until like I got into this stuff, 1985, 86, and Doolittle's name kept coming up time after time after time. Now, I knew him, and there's autographed pictures all around this den of Jimmy that I've asked for, and I saw him at various, like SCTP, which is Society of Experimental Test Pilots, and to say hello and everything, but I didn't really know him that well. But I knew that my mom knew him, and she was as close to Jimmy Doolittle as anybody in her life, Jimmy and Joe. Now, his wife passed away in the 80s sometime, and he was retired, lived in Carmel, California, and I knew that. And I also knew that my mom talked to him every once in a while. So I knew that the only way I would have of determining whether Majestic 12 was true was to get her to ask him. And it took about 6 months to get together, to get it together, because she's always hesitant, to do stuff like that. But I finally got her to do it, and she called up and she said, Jimmy, how you doing? Da 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 da. By the way, John's interested in this stuff, and I just want to know, was Majestic 12 real? And he said, yes, Moy, it was, but I can't say anything about it. That for me was, the beginning of everything. Because if Majestic 12 is real, then it's a possibility the briefing papers were real. And if they were real, then everything else is real.
Right, so, because why would you put together something like MJ-12 under Truman to investigate or manage the UFO story unless there was, if there was no UFO story, right? There's got to be a UFO if you're going to put together a group.
So I'd have to say that was my first insight.
So now, tell me something. You must know the history to some degree. I mean, you've been around a long time. You've seen them in operation. You must have met some of the insiders. And I have to say that I think they would have recruited you. Am I wrong?
No,
You never got an offer?
No, I'm just, I was a pilot. I didn't know anything, until 1984 when
but you know a lot now.
Yeah.
Look at this office. It's incredible.
Yeah. Up till 1984, my sole interest was SR-71, F-19, stealth fighter, stuff like that. As a matter of fact, you can go on the internet. John Andrews, who was vice president of testers and eventually made the sport model,
right?
He and I had letters going back and forth. He'd say, hey, you ought to look into this flying saucer deal. And I'd say, no, it's bullshit. I don't need to waste my time. That letter's on the internet. My interest didn't start till, in 1985, I think we had I used to run the reunion for all the Southeast Asia pilots that, that worked for CIA, and I'd run the reunion here in Las Vegas called China Post 1. And we'd have it every 2 years. And one of these years, and I think it was 1985, a friend of mine whose name was Greg Wilson, he was a Raven. Now the Raven were the Air Force guys they'd take out of the Air Force, sheep dip them, they'd give them civilian ID, they'd come into Laos and they'd fly, the O1s, and they were the Ravens, and they'd go out on the PDJ and all around and do all kinds of amazing things. Anyway, he attended the reunion. His name was Greg Wilson. And he got talking to him, hey, where all you been? He said, well, here and there, still flying A-10s. I spent a tour at Bentwaters. And I said, Bentwaters? That was the place, supposedly in, 1980 that the flying saucer landed. He says, no, John, not supposedly, it did. I said, I didn't get to see it because I was confined to quarters, but I know the guys who did. And I said, what? I said, you're telling me this stuff is real? He said, oh, yeah. So here's a guy that I flew with in Southeast Asia, hadn't seen for years. I give him this outrageous, question about, Bentwater. He says, yeah, I was confined. I didn't see it, but I know the guys who did. So that's what piqued my interest. That's 1985, So,
you've got insiders coming to you. You've got insiders that are friends.
I wouldn't say he was an insider. An insider like is Bob Lazar.
Right.
And the only other insider, the real insider, I mean the guy, and it's been like, if you guys were here 2 years ago, that's probably been like 5 or 6 years ago. I can't remember when I met, well, I know when it was. Yeah, it's been a long time ago. It's been almost 20 years. I used to live up in Idaho. He was retired. He told friends of mine a lot more than he told me, but just before he died, he came down to Vegas and more or less said, what do you want to know? And I didn't even know what to ask.
And his name is? Are you at liberty to tell us?
No, because, you know, the deal, the way security like that works is when they give you a clearance and when you're deep inside like that, they tell you, look, John, we've given you this clearance, and of course we expect it to keep you secret, but we know that, you know, every once in a while you may accidentally mention something at a party, you may have had too much to drink, and you think it'd be interesting to talk about this, and we just want you to know that, you know, we don't really care, we won't hurt you, but we will kill your wife, your children, your mom, your dad, your parakeet, your dog, you know, everybody else, but you'll be okay. So that's why people don't talk, and people say, well, he's on his deathbed, why wouldn't he talk? That's why, is because they make it clear. It's not him that's going to get hurt, it's every person in his family, and then starting with his best friend. Towards the end of his life, I saw him 3 times. I drove to Idaho to see him twice, and then once back here. And when I was in Idaho, he didn't tell me all that much, but he did tell me one interesting thing that never made sense until this year, when I find out, you know, the information I'm getting is just growing exponentially. Every time I get someplace, you know, then I'm led to someplace else, and it's just so much information coming in. Anyway, what he told me was that he worked on a project, a mining machine for the moon. And this thing was being built in the south somewhere. He didn't tell me where, but, you know, I'm imagining Arkansas or Alabama, someplace like that. He said, John, this thing was so big. He said that when I finished it, he said, I have a private license. I rented an airplane just to go up and fly around to see how mammoth this thing was. And I said, well, can you give me an idea? He says, acres. I said, wow. I said, how'd they get it to the moon? He said, I don't know. And that's how projects like that work. He doesn't have a need to know how they got it to the moon. His job was to build it, you know, and they're not going to tell him any of that. That's how compartmentalization works. You know, that's one.
We've been told by somebody, he told us that Project Lunex and Horizon were never cancelled, they just went black.
Absolutely. And Project Horizon is on our website, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The only thing we get, we've got 4 of the phases of Project Horizon, except one. I think it's number 2 that we need. So I'll show you that and show you what we're still looking for.
Can you just tell me one thing? Have you been threatened?
Never. Never the slightest bit.
Okay. All right, well, so either you've never crossed the line, you've never revealed anything that you weren't supposed to, or you don't know enough. Is that
Or
right?
you're doing someone a favor.
Or somebody's protecting me.
Okay, so the last...
But you are exactly right. Either I'm talking through my hat and I don't have the real information.
Right.
Or somebody's protecting me.
Do you know who?
Oh, I didn't say which one was true. I mean, you know, I think a lot of this stuff is true, but how would I know? I've never been to the moon. I'd like to go. Mm-hmm. If I go and somebody can arrange a ride, like Bob Lazar, he says he's going to have his spacesuit on while we're standing, you know, in the airlock there. And when it comes up like that, he says, you know, at least I'm going to have some air, you know, and I'll watch you suffocate. And I said, no, I'll be able to breathe normally. Now, when people go to the moon, it takes them 2 weeks of decompression before they can actually go out and spend some time there. The fact is, you can go right there and breathe, but you know you'll get altitude sickness. Just like if you go to climb Everest, you can go right up there. You'll probably live, but you'll hurt pretty bad. That's why they go to the different camps as they go up, is to get acclimatized. And the same thing to the moon. It takes about 2 weeks.
Okay, so tell us how the moon got where it is, because you know that the moon is a satellite that's actually a fake.
Right. It's a spaceship. It was towed into orbit, I would say 30 to 40,000 years ago. Now, the reason I say 30 to 40,000 years ago is because it's still within the history of man. Velikovsky talks about the different proselenes and the different civilizations that talked about the time when there was no moon, and then when there was 2 moons, and now we have 1 moon. This guy here, Norm Bergman, wrote The Ringmakers of Saturn, It's an excellent book. Norm Bergman is very qualified, was for 40 years a scientific part of both NACA and also Lockheed. Retired from Lockheed, I think about 15 years ago. No,
What's
more than
NACA?
that. National Aeronautics, the predecessor to NASA.
Oh, really? Okay.
National Aeronautics Commission, Aeronautics, I think.
I see. Okay.
They were the predecessor to NASA.
Okay.
But when he retired, he somehow got some photos, some really good negatives of Voyager, which went by Saturn. And he's set up a little lab in his house, and he started looking these. And he ended up writing Ringmakers of Saturn. And what he shows you here is what he found in the rings of Saturn is 3 vehicles, spaceships, the biggest of which is 31,496 miles long and 2,422 miles in diameter. We're talking about a fairly large spaceship there. Now, Norm Bergman, when he wrote this book at the beginning, it's very good. He says, now look, he says, I'm going to be talking about some stuff that is very interesting, but you can't skip a page, you can't skip a word that you don't know. You have to go from the beginning to end or you won't understand what I'm saying. And I did go from beginning to end. Now,
Okay, but when was this written?
This would be 1986.
Okay, so it's not that old.
No. And I go see Norm.
And it's talking about a huge spaceship.
In
Is
the
who
Rings
built
of
the
Saturn.
spaceship?
Who built them?
Yeah.
We don't know who built them. But anyway,
Us?
no. We couldn't build anything like that. We have some amazing stuff, but we couldn't do that.
Okay.
No, this is somebody else. But what the interesting part in the book, and the reason why we're getting here, is because at the end of this book, he starts talking about the moon and how the moon was towed into orbit. Because the people that operate that stuff in Saturn and also Iapetus towed the moon into orbit. And he goes into here and explains exactly why he believes the moon was towed into orbit and how it was and how they grabbed on to the Mare Orientale.
Who are you saying towed the moon?
Whoever.
Into
We don't
place?
know. We don't
So
know.
he doesn't conjecture on who,
No.
on what alien race, for example.
No.
I mean, obviously it's an alien race. Henry Deacon, our secret source, has also substantiated that the moon was towed into orbit. But have you got an idea what alien race was responsible for that?
No, absolutely not.
None.
What's interesting here, another interesting thing is I see Norm every year because when I go do the UFO Expo West, which is the only one I do, he lives in Los Altos Hills. And he's writing about Iapetus. And Iapetus is probably a spaceship too.
Okay.
And so
we got to get in touch with this guy.
you better, because he's on his way out. I
All
saw
right.
him last September. He was not well. He was finishing up the book on Iapetus, but he wasn't working on it every day.
Okay, was he a scientist?
Yes.
Okay, but who did he work for? I mean, in other words, he's
Give
government.
me a
he's at
second
NACA.
here.
I understand that, but in a certain level, he's revealing secret information.
No,
Is it-
as what?
well, I'm just asking you. Wouldn't
No.
this be secret?
No. Thermodynamicist, Douglas Aircraft, 1943-94. Aero Research Scientist, NACA Ames Laboratory, 1944-1956. Lockheed Missile and Space Company. Then I Supervisor Flight Test, 1956-68. Manager Flight Test Analysis, 1958-1962. Manager Test Plans and Direction, 1962-63. Manager Re-Entry Test Operations, 63-64.
Okay, but-
there's all this stuff, how qualified this guy is.
Right.
This
Why
is
are they letting him talk?
Why-
Why are they letting him do this? I mean, in
What's
other
he
words,
saying? There's a spaceship that's 31 miles long in the rings of
So
Saturn.
plausible
Who's
deniability is-
sure? Who's going to believe that?
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. So anyway, 2 years ago, at the UFO Expo West, I mean that was so interesting because number one, one of my lectures was Apollo 1 and the 4 people that were in it, and there was Grissom, White, and Chaffee, and then there was a fourth guy, and he was part of the secret astronaut corps. And the reason they had to keep it secret is because if the public were allowed to know there was a fourth guy in there, then they would not want to know who he was. And there was no possible way that NASA could ever reveal that there was another guy in there, because they would have to reveal the secret space program. And the secret space program started in 1959, and they're the ones that went to the moon in 1962. They went to Mars in 1966. Everything we know is a cover for the secret space program.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, when I give a lecture, if I have 2 hours, I always give an hour and then let the public talk to me for an hour, because I'm going to learn more from them than they are going to from me. And one of Chaffee's relatives got up and said, "John, you're right. We've always known this. There was a fourth man, but we didn't know who it was." Now, I know who the name is, but I keep it to myself, because if somebody comes to me, and says, "I know who it is," I know who it is. And it's really interesting, because his son is a current shuttle astronaut.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So anyway, I go to see Norm 2 years ago, and in talking with him, I said, "By the way, the electromagnetic vehicle that towed the moon into orbit, where is it now?" And he said, "I think it's on the backside of the moon." So when I got hooked up with Ron Schmidt, we started collecting photos on the backside of the moon, and we found it. It's in the crater Tchaikovsky. And the story of how we did it was so interesting, and how NASA covered it up. There's, like 6 different photos of Tchaikovsky as they tried to airbrush this electromagnetic vehicle out of the picture by making it an island. But we got them. We got 2 really good photos. One was discovered by a lady who works for us in Florida, and she discovered it on a thumbnail of Tchaikovsky. And what happened is, when NASA was advertising this particular photo, they airbrushed the big one, but when they had the thumbnail, somebody looked at that and said, "Hey, I'm not going to take the time to enlarge that, take the vehicle out and put it down. Nobody will notice it anyway." But we noticed it, and it's great. And that's where we got the photo of the EMV on the far side. And Apollo 15 flew over it, and they got some movies of it, and it's just a quick shot, but it's really interesting.
The secret astronaut who was killed, his son is a shuttle astronaut.
Right.
Okay. And this is interesting, because it sort of shows how they bring someone into the fold who might have something to tell the world at a later date.
Right.
But if he's a shuttle astronaut, he's not going to talk, right? He's in the fold.
Right. Same thing with Grissom's son.
Oh, really?
He's in the program.
See, this would be an interesting investigative angle, would be, what about all the sons and daughters of the astronauts? Do they all work for the company?
Yeah, it would be. Now, Gus Grissom, when the fire started, every single story you read will say that, there's like 3 words spoken. Chaffee said, "Fire." Somebody said, "It's getting hot in here." But in every single story, Grissom doesn't say anything. Now, as you know, Grissom was the most highly critical and vociferous astronaut in that program. He came out, before they were supposed to go up there, he said, "There's 60 major things with this wrong. How can we possibly be flying this?" He's the one that hung the lemon over the Apollo, and NASA hated him. Now, I've been told by guys I consider insiders, and there's another one, call him number 4, that NASA didn't specifically kill those guys, but they let it happen. They knew it was going to happen, and they just let it happen.
But why?
Well, there was a number of reasons. Number 1, they needed more time. They needed to get the program back on schedule, and the only way they could do that was to have a horrendous accident, and they wanted to get rid of Grissom. And so, as you know, the New York Times, and I forget the guy, the story the next day was that he talked to NASA, and they said that the tape was gruesome of the last few minutes. And of course, we've all heard that Grissom didn't say anything. We all know what he said. he was saying, you know, you bastards, you've
Oh my
killed us
God.
all. You know, I knew this was coming to this. You know, I hope you all watch us, you know, die. And just really bad. And so I'm sure that's what happened. And I saw another quote just yesterday, I can't remember what it was, about how gruesome the tape was.
Wow.
We'd like to ask you if Clark McClelland has got something to say about this as well.
Yeah.
We're in touch with Clark, but we haven't met him.
Clark's a great guy. I've known him since 1990. We've never met, but we've always talked on the phone. You know, I've always tried to get his notes. He has his book ready. He has 3 books. He doesn't want to publish one of them. He wants to publish all 3. I don't blame him. He knows a lot of stuff. He knows, as you know, much more than I'm telling you.
Do you think that he's actually going to get his books published? Are they going to
No
let him
way,
out there?
not a chance in hell.
Okay.
The only thing, you know, I'd like to get him, but, you know, Clark is so pissed, and I don't know what happened, but I know he is the insider of NASA. There's nobody in the position, you know, that could come out and say more than Clark. I mean, he was there from the beginning.
Okay.
But they've done just about everything but kill him, haven't they? He hasn't got a penny.
And I don't know why they
yeah.
haven't killed him.
Absolutely.
Anyway, one more thing I'm going to tell you about Norm, because we're going to get it into it later. I told Norm the last time, last year I went to the UFO Expo, and well, I'll tell you, got some good information. But anyway, I went to see Norm, and he's not well, and he's had several surgeries, and I expect any day to hear that he's passed away. He's 87, and I said, Norm, I said, I'm thinking that the airplanes that crashed into the World Trade Center were holographs. And he said, John, you're probably right, and here's why. He said, just before I retired, I was driving down on the Bayshore Freeway to Sunnyvale, and he said I had a friend in the right seat of the car, and he says, like it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 8:15. He said, we're driving south, and we saw this shadow, and we looked up, and here, he says, it wasn't a 747, but it was a huge 4-engine airplane. It wasn't 200 feet above us. And he said, we looked out and looked at this thing, and he said, of course, we're, you know, 20 miles from San Jose, you know, and 30 miles from San Francisco. There's no possible way an airplane could, you know, legitimately be flying right there. And he says, we watched it for about 10 seconds, and it went just like you turned a light bulb out. And he said, if that was the contemporary holograph presentation of a holograph, he says, then you're right. And you know,
that's
the
very interesting.
the holographic technology is so far advanced that people just wouldn't believe it. But the other day, I had a lady here that was helping Marilee on a casting program. Actually, she hired Marilee. She was from New York. She had 2 degrees from Harvard. She was just a wonderful, smart, receptive lady. And we were talking about holographs. She says, well, let me tell you. She said, about 5 years ago, I was invited with about 15 other television executives into a private showing in Hollywood. And there was a little auditorium. It wasn't very big. It could seat like maybe 30 people. And the presentation was called The Future of Television. And she said, I don't remember if Steven Spielberg was there, but, you know, everybody else was. And she said it was, you know, brightly lit. And there was a stage and a podium on the stage. And we're sitting there, and this guy comes out from behind, and he's a kind of East German accent, East European accent, white hair, has glasses, and he comes out and he starts telling us the history of television and how they came up with the first cathode ray tube, and how they did this and how they did that. And you know, he's walks down in front of the stage, you know, walks up one of the aisles, he's polishing his glasses, you know, walks back up to the stage, you know. And she says it was pretty boring. She says after about 20 minutes, he wraps it up with something, you know, and that's the history of television. You know, he puts his glasses on, and just like a light.
He disappeared? He was a hologram?
Yeah. And so,
wow.
you know, that was 7 years ago. So that's what television is coming to, is you won't have a screen.
Right.
You'll just turn it on, and it'll be happening right there.
It's right there. That's great.
So
Well, that makes sense.
the reason I
because
tell you
the
that
Yellow
story,
Book, I mean, they had the Yellow Book, right, from what, the crash in 1947, apparently. So, and that's substantiated by Dan Birish over and over again. So that's a hologram, technology, right?
so the reason I tell you that is
So they
because
back engineered it.
on ATS, when I first went there, one of the things they talked about was, there were no planes on 9/11. There
Okay,
was no
this
airplane
is
at
this is
Shanksville.
really
There was no
dynamite
airplane at
stuff.
Pentagon. There was no airplane at the World Trade Center. And I'm telling you, when I started talking about holographs, the descent, I mean, the crush of guys that were out to kill me, I mean, it was amazing. There was like 20 guys saying, "You're nuts, this is absolutely, you're doing a disservice to the 9/11, movement, to
Right.
find out the truth, You talk about that, nobody's going to believe. But the fact was, it was a holograph and it was CGI. And
Right. So can you take us through that? Take us through why you think that's true and how you got. I mean, you're a pilot. You certainly have, a vote in whether those planes had the capacity to hit those buildings. Because our Henry Deacon has told us some very interesting things also about those planes. Actually, he thinks they were remote controlled. I don't know if that's true, but basically that planes don't have the ability to actually steer into buildings at that level. I mean, I'm not a pilot, so I don't understand the logistics. But how did you come around to this?
okay, first of all, we're going to talk about Flight 11 and 77 didn't exist in the beginning. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics has no record of them taking off, has no, so let's forget about them because they did not exist. So now we're just talking about 175 and Flight 93. Flight 93 allegedly crashed at Shanksville. Anybody who has any background in accident investigation or any background at all can't possibly believe an airplane crash. There was no wreckage. It just simply could not happen.
Okay.
As far as 175 crashing into the South Tower, I just recently put in a call to Pan American flight simulator in Miami to see if I could rent a 767-200, which they have. And what I wanted to do was take six candidate pilots. One current and qualified in the 767-200, one maybe qualified but not current, and then one maybe current in a high-speed jet but not the 767, and then the last three the same currency as the alleged hijackers, like a couple hours in an Apache, a private license, maybe a commercial, something like that. And what I would do is in the simulator, you can take them up. That New York is just like it is. I mean, the buildings are there, and I would take them and freeze them in a position 20 miles out at 7,000 feet, 560 miles an hour, put them in the seat, say, and then give them 2 minutes of looking at the horizons, show them where the World Trade Center is, and say, I'm about to release you. When I do, you'll have 1 minute and 50 seconds to hit dead center. Now, the World Trade Center is 220 feet wide. You got to hit to the center, not left or right, right to the center, and explain how it goes. Then I would have one camera pointing at the pilot and one camera pointing at what he's looking at.
All right.
And then say, go. And say, okay, now show me how easy this is, because all the guys on AT, I did that in Flight Simulator, no problem, It's impossible. At the height of my career, as proficient I was in every kind of airplane, there's no way I could have done that. I mean, it's just too complex. First of all, the airplane can't fly above 560 miles an hour. It can't fly more than 360, which is its velocity max operating. Maybe could fly maybe 30, 40 miles an hour faster than that, but at VMO, the clacker comes on. The clacker is an FAA required safety device which clacks loud, click, 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 and it clacks at a rate and a cycle that irritates the pilot so that he can't ignore it. He has to slow down, Now, there's no possibility a hijacker, first time in the airplane, is not only going to, fly it at 390 miles, 400 miles, but do it with that clacker,
Right.
And descend and hit that thing center. It can't happen,
I have a question here, if I may. We have a credible witness who says that the planes weren't piloted, but they were remotely controlled, like unmanned vehicles from thousands of miles away.
I just
And
said
he
that.
said, yes, but I'm asking John to comment on that from the point of view that this also answers the question raised by the fact that no human pilot could have hit that small target.
No airplane crashed in the World Trade Center. First of all, remote controlling an airplane that size or any size is very difficult. And so I don't believe you could remote control an airplane the size of a 767-200 anyway, particularly to hit dead center of the World Trade Center. But the fact is, there was no wreckage from any airplane in the World Trade Center. And by no wreckage, I mean that nothing was found of any size anywhere around. Now, there was a panel of a fuselage that you see with 5 window shades, but when each airplane, American Airlines, the North Tower, and United Airlines, and the South Tower, hit, it was 2/5 of a second while they disappeared into the airplane. So in 2/5 of a second, you're not going to have a panel about 7 feet long drift down, you know, and just be lying there in almost perfect condition, unless it was accompanied by Mohammed Atta's passport. The only other thing that was found was the engine on Murray Street, and the engine on Murray Street has been identified as either a CFM-56. CFM stands for Senecma, or the CF-6, which was a 767 engine, which was developed out of the CFM-56. But whichever one it was, the CF-6 or the CFM-56, it had to be General Electric. And unfortunately, or fortunately, United Airlines used strictly Pratt & Whitney. So that engine that you see flying off, and that engine they say is from 175, isn't from 175, because the guys whose job was to dump it off there, you know, in a smoking, smoldering thing, dumped off the wrong engine. There was a lot of things that the perps did that were suspect here. You know, the collapse of building number 7 is just absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
And the reason they had to do it that way is because I suspect the holographic projector that projected Flight 175 and Flight 11 somehow became disabled, because Flight 93 was the one that was supposed to crash into Building 7. And when they couldn't do it, they had to do things quickly, make it fake 93 crashing in Shanksville. And I can imagine these guys all day long, what are we going to do? Nobody's going to believe this thing just collapsed, you know, from a little fire. And about 5 o'clock, you know, they said, well, let's go ahead and do it. Maybe no one will notice. So they collapsed this 47-story building, you know, into its footprint, you know, and expect everybody to believe it. And of course they did. So.
Okay, so they collapsed it into its footprint, but what did they use? I mean, don't they have scalar weaponry? I mean, you know, can't they just hit it?
Yes, we do, but that particular thing was collapsed because it had controlled demolition, just like the World Trade Center.
Right.
The World Trade Center, what they did with controlled demolitions is the first part was to make what we call the Wile E. Coyote cutout in the face, like an airplane crashed in it, which is absolutely insanely ridiculous, but a lot of people believed it. And then the other thing is they had to use controlled demolitions to cut each girder to 30 feet so it would fit on Rudy Giuliani's trucks going out of town. The World Trade Center was collapsed by a direct energy weapon being operated from one of our space weapons platforms. And the reason we know that is because of the size of the dust that was left of the concrete. It was approximately 80 microns, and that's what a direct energy weapon collapse, when it's pointed down, that's what it uses. It's called molecular disassociation. I mean, it just disassociates the molecular structure of concrete, and that's why all that dust was there. There was just nothing left. That's why the basement of the World Trade Center was molten for 6 weeks, is because when it finally does hit the ground, it heats it up so much you can pour as much water as you want. It's not going to cool off for a time. So I believe that all of this was controlled by the E-4B, the doomsday airplane, the 747, that was seen flying over the White House. I think there's the one that did the holographic projection, and they also transmitted the CGI, computer graphics, to the different TV channels to show the airplanes allegedly crashing. That's why we had the accidental nose out on one of the buildings. They were the ones that sent the alleged cell phone messages, which never occurred. They did all kinds of stuff. They made probably transponder things for the different ATCs to phone.
So
They
you're
were,
saying the hologram had to be done by a plane in the air?
yeah,
Really?
yeah, it was done by a projector, a
Okay,
holographic
yeah.
projector.
Okay, so the technology exists out there. Have you? I mean, and I understand that you talked to your friend who
Norm
wrote the
Berggren.
book, Norm. But where else have you heard about this holographic technology?
Ron Blackburn, you know who he is?
No.
Do you know who he is?
No, I don't.
Ron Blackburn was with Lockheed for 30 years. He was with the stealth project up at Groom Lake for 20 years. He was the one that I first heard there was aliens at the test site. Now, when I first met him, 10, 15 years ago, he denied knowing everything. Now he's gotten a little bit more lax about what he says. I mean, he says, up at Groom Lake, there's an administration building, just for the aliens up there. Ron was at my birthday party here. So he's retired
we need
now.
to get to this guy as well.
He's retired. He's very careful about what he says.
Okay.
He still has retirement, but he came to my birthday party, and he told us about holographic projections. He says they contain sound, light, heat, everything. I mean, everything is there. One of the problems that people have with holographic projections, well, I saw it. It couldn't have been, they think of holographic projections like you see in Las Vegas or at a birthday party,
Right.
where it's a little dancing light like
Where
there.
you can see through it.
Yeah, and they
so
say,
you know it's
well,
fake.
I saw it, couldn't be. It's ridiculous. And then they say, well, how would they have done the sound? They would have had speakers all up and down, the street. It's too bad people, they don't really realize how far we are advanced with our technology. They were fooled. It was a scam. It was a psyop. And
Okay, so who ran it?
basically, I call them the nasty NASA Nazis and the military-industrial complex. And Hoagland tells us exactly who they are and how they took over. And that's who ran it. Now, in March 31st, 2007, last year, a guy named Morgan Reynolds, have you heard the name?
Yes.
Okay, filed a suit called a quid-em complaint against these 22 companies. And we're talking about major companies here. Science Applications International Corporation, Applied Research, Hughes, all these companies right here are being sued. And what they're being sued for is accepting money for providing a government agency with fraudulent information. The government agency they provided with this fraudulent information was NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST was asked by President Bush to determine exactly why the World Center collapsed. What actually caused it to collapse? And they came up with a reason that, the jet fuel, and it was just so far ridiculous that Morgan filed this suit, and it's 40 pages, and he outlines everything that they got wrong. And so the suit has been going along in court now.
And you've testified as to the holographic planes as part of the suit, right?
Well, what I
I know
did
you
is
signed an
I
affidavit.
filed an affidavit on January 28th, 2008, this year, in support of the complaint and in opposition to the motion to dismiss. And basically what I testified is, number one, why the airplanes couldn't have traveled as fast as they did, and how they couldn't be flown as well as they were, and why there was no wreckage in there.
It's
And
amazing
I think this
other
book,
pilots haven't come forward because this is.
well, other pilots are employed. They can't afford to come forward. There's very few, people. There's a lot of.
But this is our country we're talking about,
They can't do it. A lot of my information was taken from aerodynamics for naval aviators, and I explain why an airplane cannot fly 500 miles at 1,000 feet. It has to do with drag, and it has to do with power, and it has to do with the fact that they use turbofans. It just cannot happen. So anyway, the governments and NIST contention that that they flew 500 miles an hour, it didn't happen. It couldn't happen. So basically, that's what I explain in my suit. Now, you say, why don't many pilots come forward? Many have. There's an organization called Pilots for Truth. .com, and I'm a member, one of the earlier members of that, and there's a lot of people that that realize that this couldn't have possibly happened. There is no an airplane like a Boeing 757 flying into the Pentagon. No, that didn't happen.
So what happened at the Pentagon?
At the Pentagon, a bomb went off to make that hole there, and they had a 55-gallon drum of diesel fuel that a guy lit to make all that black smoke there. And April Gallup, who
I think the April Gallup story is fascinating.
April Gallup was a Army.
Okay, so let's go back where we were, which is
We're talking about April Gallup.
Right, April. Okay.
April Gallup was a Army specialist, and I forget what her job was, but she had a top secret clearance. She was sitting about 40 feet from the where the explosion made the hole in the front of the Pentagon, and she had her 6-month-old son right below her desk, and she thought that was odd because, you know, usually when she went to work before going through security, they had to put the little kids in daycare, but on that day, security said, no, take the kid in with you. So she had it. She had the kid right below in his little holder there, and she says it was really strange because as she pressed the on button for her computer, that's when the building exploded. And she said a lot of debris came down on her, and she saw the hole over there, and she thought, I got to get out of here. So she picked up her kid, put it over his back, and went towards that opening. And she got through that opening onto the grass, which is where eventually triage was set up. But she said she saw no missile, saw no airplane, smelled no fuel. There was no airplane in there. And later in the hospital, she got interviewed by Army intelligence, and they asked her what she saw. And she started to say, I didn't see anything. And they said, no, yes, you did. You saw a Boeing 757 crash into there. And she says, no, I didn't. I mean, there was nothing there. And she's gone through hell for the last 4 or 5 years trying to get medical care. It's been a really very, very sad story. But one of the things I wanted to show, this is a page from a military manual talking about stuff that they would like to get in the year 2025. This is called Airborne Holographic Projector. You can see where I got it. You can't get it anymore here, but was www.au.af.mil. And I got about 250 pages of this stuff. But it says...
It's talking about a hologram machine.
It refers to enemy perception management. Is that right? That's such a wonderful euphemism. Have I remembered that right?
Yeah, it says, brief description. The holographic projector plays a three-dimensional visual image in a desired location, removed from the display generator. The projector can be used for psychological operations and strategic perception management. It is also useful for optical deception and cloaking, providing a momentary distraction when engaging an unsophisticated adversary. And it has capabilities, precision projection of a three-dimensional visual images into a selected area, supports PSYOP and strategic deception management, and provides deception and cloaking against optical centers.
Okay, and when was that written? Do you know?
I think in 99. I'm not sure. I'll give you an address where you can get it now.
Okay.
It's not at that address, but I think it's at Maxwell Air Force Base.
But you have to. We have to believe that if that's out in the public sector, that this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as this technology goes.
Absolutely.
Strategic perception management. Isn't that just wonderful?
It's great.
I just think that's so great.
All
For
right,
an unsophisticated enemy like the people on the streets of New York.
I was going to say that. And I thought, you know what? I don't think I'll say that.
Nothing personal against New York.
But they have, and then when you go into it, they have what they call the hybrid high energy laser system. But when you go in here and get a close-up of this system, it's showing you how they could attack right between Iran and Afghanistan. It's hilarious, you know. That's where they'll be attacking, and that's where they knew they were going to be attacking back in, 1999, you know. And that was published then. So you can see how far ahead they plan this stuff. I mean, they plan it 30 years ahead. I was looking for that page.
Okay, when you say they're going to be attacking between Iran and
Afghanistan. That's where the pipeline is coming. They want that area. That's
right.
why
So that's why we're going to war with Iran, is what you're saying.
we want to clear that area so that we can run the pipeline down there.
And they're going to use, it sounds like you're saying they're going to use a special kind of weapon to attack.
Well, they could use that hybrid high energy laser. You know, they got plenty of stuff they could use.
Right.
But it was just odd that, that it would be already on paper available to the public to show them where they're going to be attacking.
Okay, this is...
What you said to us off camera just before we started was you felt that there was going to be, I think you used the words, a nuclear war.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt that we're going to nuke Iran. I'm sure that's in the plan, and Cheney certainly wants to do it. I don't know, have any inside information, but it looks to me like one of the possible scenarios would be Bush gets assassinated in October, Cheney becomes president and then declares martial law. And then something happens and where we have to attack Iran. Of course, we won't attack Iran, we'll get Israel to do it. And they'll attack them with their nukes. And then we'll slap them on the wrist by saying, we're going to give you $50 billion for a rehabilitation program here so that you won't nuke anybody else. Psychological rehabilitation program. We'll give them,
Okay, but nobody's going to get away with nuking anyone. I mean, in other words, you're going to have China, you're going to have Russia. I mean, basically we're going to be in World War III at that point, right?
Yeah, but it won't be that big. What they're going to do is cut the cables, communication
the undersea
cables.
cable thing.
Yeah, so that there's not a lot of not communications, so that
So
they
no
can
one
give
knows
it,
what's really happening.
No one really knows what's happening. It'll be all handled on an upper level. All this is handled on an upper level. All this has been planned in communication with and in agreement with China and Russia. They all know what's going on. So it'll be, just to try out new weapons.
Well, actually, this is what, again, our Henry Deacon says. He says China's in on it. There's going to be a war with China, but they already know it's planned.
Of course. And like everybody was ready for the Japanese Cayuga and the Chinese satellite, and on ATS they said they'll tell us what's going on, they'll give us the real pictures, and all they did was recycle old NASA pictures, And of course China was very embarrassed. They said these are not recycled NASA pictures, but you could go right to where yes, that was an old recycled NASA picture. Now, what they're doing up there orbiting the moon, if they are orbiting the moon, I don't know, but they're certainly not taking pictures, that they could use for themselves.
Why not?
Because they're already in on it. They already know what's there. I mean, we mind
So what's
them.
the modus? So what's the MO behind doing all of this? I mean, why are they going to plan wars, nuclear? You're talking about nuclear wars where, millions of people are going to die. Land is going to become uninhabitable. I mean, this is crazy. Even if they want to keep a pipeline there, what's the point in making the land? I mean,
they've cleaned up nuclear weapons in the past 30 years. They don't have that much radiation.
Why go nuclear, though? I mean, it's so messy. Why would, I'm not a military guy, but if they've got scalar weaponry and they've got HARP, I mean, they've got earthquakes they can cause. I mean, there are a lot of other things they can do besides going. I mean, that just seems like the nth degree of insanity. Why would they do it?
It's like asking, when I talk about Endeavour and the space shuttle being such an outmoded method of getting the IS, and people say, well, if we have all this cool stuff that you say, like, satellites and anti-grav stuff and everything, why do they use a space shuttle? The same thing with the nuke thing. There's levels of secrecy, levels of intelligence. You want to keep a certain segment of the people knowing, just, thinking that the space shuttle is all we got, and nuclear weapons is all we got, so we use those. It's that type of deal.
Okay, so you're going to kill millions of people, eliminate.
I don't think
know.
it'll be millions, but it'll be a few.
And what is Iran going to do at that point? You know?
Oh, they'll get all pissed off. I don't really know what they'll do.
Okay, do you have any inside contacts about this?
Let's see, about Iran, about nuking Iran.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. What about 2012 and a hologram of an alien invasion? Have you heard this scenario?
Absolutely would be probably what they're going to do. They're going to put a hologram and say, oh, we're being attacked, by aliens. We've made a deal with the ambassador, and he says that they feel that Earth is a threat. But if you all take any weapons you have and turn them in, that they'll give us a second chance.
So at that point, we have one world government because they can put everybody under the same roof, and basically all the countries. You're talking not individuals bringing their rifles.
Yeah, individuals. Yeah, that's one of the things.
Forward with their.
That's one of the things the aliens want, is for all you guys, to turn in your individual weapons so that they don't feel so much of a threat.
But aliens, come on. Okay, so this is a scenario.
It's a scenario where the government wants to disarm us, and the way is to put a hologram up there of an attack, and they say we've been in communications with them,
a
and
common enemy, and it's a fake enemy.
And you can really help us if you'll turn in all your weapons. Of course, by the time we've turned in all our weapons, there's not much we can do when we find out it's just a scam, like 9/11 was. Yeah, that's a scenario. I'm sure that's going to happen.